Tim Flannery's described him as the greatest living environmentalist. All I know is a warm, generous, compassionate and wonderful human being. I welcome to the stage to give the first Green oration in Hobart Town Hall, Professor David Suzuki.
Thank you so much. It's always great to get back here and on what a great day. I mean, it looks like the dawn of a new time with this agreement that's in place. I think I agree with Bob. It's still just the beginning, but what a wonderful beginning. But to be here to celebrate as well the formation of what became a model for the rest of the world, the Green Party. I'm honored and thrilled to be here. 1972 was a very special year. That's the year that I happened to marry my life partner, Tara Cullis. Tara, she's here. She's the brains and the looks in our family. And, in many universities, there's a tradition that when an esteemed or eminent professor reaches the end of her or his career, that they're asked to present a last lecture, a summation of a lifetime of academic thinking to the university community. I taught at the University of British Columbia for 39 years. Nobody ever asked me to give one of those last lectures. But when this film was being talked about, we decided that part of it would be a last lecture that I would give at the university. So in December of last year, I sifted through a lifetime of experience and tried to sum things up in a one-hour lecture, and I'd like to share some of those thoughts that came out of that. I'm 74 years old, and when you get to be my age, I kind of hate to say this when I look at some of the real elders here, but I think you can't deny that you're in the last part of your life, except for those of you who may have been lucky enough to have chosen your parents wisely. I'm in what I call the death zone. There's nothing morbid about saying that. We're all going to die. And I think it becomes a duty then of elders to get on with the most important part of our lives. You see, I think as elders, it's our job to reflect back on a lifetime of experience, of thought, and observations, to distill a legacy to pass on for our children and grandchildren. A few months ago, a reporter asked me, well, what do you hope people are saying about you after you're gone? I was really shocked at this question. I said, look, after I'm dead, I don't give a shit what people say about me. I'll be dead. But it would be nice if an idea or two I had still reverberated through a few people's conversation. While I'm still kicking, I can offer a gift. That gift has no hidden agenda of power or fame or money. I offer it to you from my heart, and I'd like to believe I speak the truth. I hope in offering my legacy of a few ideas, it will prompt each of you, including many of you who are still young, to ask, what is life all about? What is it that matters most to me? What brings me the greatest joy and happiness? And what do I hope my legacy might be? I'm a geneticist, and one of the astounding things that I've witnessed in science in the last 30 or 40 years has been the accumulation of techniques and manipulative powers to look at the properties of DNA, the genetic material. And in 2001, the scientific community announced the completion of the complete delineation of 3 billion letters in the human genome. This was an absolutely astounding achievement. It would be like getting the entire arrangement of letters and words in 1,000 volumes of the complete works of Shakespeare. This is an amazing achievement. And out of that arose to me the most amazing insight from the human genome, that 99% of the genes in every one of our cells are identical to the genes in chimpanzees. They are our nearest relatives, that every one of us contains tens of thousands of genes identical to the genes in our pet dogs and cats, identical to the genes in eagles and salmon, in fruit flies, dandelions, and cedar trees. All of life is our biological kin. We share a common evolutionary history, and surely if other species are our relatives, then they deserve to be treated with better care and respect than if we simply regard them as resources, as vermin or pests or weeds. And in an act of incredible generosity, that web of living things that are our relatives cleanse, create, and replenish our most fundamental needs. It's the web of living things that created the oxygen-rich air that animals like us depend on. Before plants arose on the earth, there was no oxygen in the air, because oxygen is a very highly reactive element, and when it was released, it immediately reacted and disappeared from the air. It was the invention of photosynthesis that over millions of years took carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and made the oxygen-rich atmosphere that animals like us depend on. Life is a critical part of the hydrologic cycle. The very first science lesson I remember from grade school was that water covers 70% of the earth, evaporates, forms clouds, rains on the land, runs into rivers and lakes, evaporates. As water cartwheels around the planet, life itself is a part of that cycle and filters the water after it falls to the earth through the tree roots and other plant roots in the soil, fungi and bacteria. Every bit of our food was once alive, and life itself creates the very soil on which we grow most of our food. And all of the energy in our bodies that we need to move and grow and reproduce, and all of the energy in our fuel from peat to dung to wood, coal, oil, and gas, is sunlight captured by plants. So the point I'm trying to make is that the web of living things who are our relatives create the most fundamental needs that we as animals must have to stay alive and healthy. We boast that we are intelligent. Oh, we're a clever animal. But what intelligent creature, knowing the role that air, water, soil, photosynthesis, and biodiversity play in keeping us alive and healthy, would then proceed to deliberately and so thoughtlessly pour our most toxic wastes onto them, destroy ecosystems and habitat, driving thousands of species to extinction, as if it's somehow our God-given right and that it won't ultimately affect us. Scientists can also use DNA in the most clever ways to trace the movement of humanity around the planet over time. And all of the trails of humanity lead back to Africa 150,000 years ago. I can't wait for the Ku Klux Klan to invite me to give a lecture in the southern United States and tell these pointy-headed characters that we're all Africans. That's where we were born. Try to imagine what the world was like 150,000 years ago. There were still woolly mammoths on the planet. There were still saber-toothed tigers, giant moa birds, and sloths all over North America. The world was a very different place. And if we were to have a time machine to go back 150,000 years and park above the Rift Valley in Africa, we would see animals in number and variety beyond anything that we would see on the Serengeti today. And if we would have to look very, very hard to see those clumps of 3, 4, or 5 of those funny-looking two-legged furless apes. And that was us. Now, seen in that context, you gotta admit, we weren't very impressive. I mean, I'm sure that no other species looked at us and began to tremble and whispered, "Watch out for that naked ape man, they're gonna take over the planet." Like, There weren't very many of us. We weren't very big. We weren't very fast. An elephant can outrun the fastest human on earth. We weren't very strong. A chimpanzee weighing 100 pounds could whip my ass, and probably everyone in this room, except for Bob, of course. And we certainly weren't endowed with any special senses of vision or hearing or smell. I mean, you gotta say, what the heck did that creature have going for it? Well, of course, our secret was hidden. You couldn't see it from the outside. It was a 2-kilogram organ buried deep in our skulls. That brain endowed us with a massive memory. No other mammal on earth has the memory capacity of a human brain. We were curious, and we were inventive. And those qualities of memory, curiosity, and inventiveness more than compensated for our lack of physical and sensory ability. That brain remembered from experience, learned from trial and error, invented new ways. That brain was aware of itself in space and time as no other mammal today is. That brain applied ideas that it gained through observation and experience. And we could dream of a world yet to come. We could imagine a future where we could avoid dangers and exploit opportunities. Foresight, the ability to look ahead, I believe, was our great leg up, our great advantage. By looking ahead, we could imagine the future and work towards making it happen. In only 150,000 years, that great evolutionary strategy got us to where we occupy every continent on the planet and rocketed into dominance. Just consider our numbers. Before the agricultural revolution, as the agricultural revolution that transformed our history began in 10,000 years ago, it's estimated there were 10 million of us around the entire world. And then with the agricultural revolution, our numbers ramped up in only 8,000 years when Jesus Christ is thought to have been born. There were then 10 times as many, 100 million human beings on the planet. And then in less than two millennia, by the early 1800s, we achieved our first 1 billion population. And then in less than 200 years, we reached 6.9 billion human beings. We are now the most numerous mammalian species on the planet. There's a rule or a principle in biology that there is an inverse relationship between the numbers a species achieves and its physical size. In other words, the smaller you are, the more of you there can be. And that makes a lot of sense. If you're a very small animal, you don't need as much space, food, and all that other stuff. So if you're a mouse species, there can be a lot of you. There can be tens of millions of you. But as you get bigger and bigger, by the time you get to elephants and whales, a species number will be in the tens of thousands. Humans have somehow bypassed this basic principle. We're a middling-sized animal, but we are now the most numerous mammalian species on the planet. And of course we did that with trade and with technology. Now that we are the most numerous animal on the planet, just the act of living, because there are 6.9 billion of us, means every one of us has to breathe air, drink water, eat food, clothe and shelter ourselves. Just the act of staying alive means our species has a very big ecological footprint. It takes a lot of air, water, and land just to keep us alive. But of course, we're not like mice or rats or rabbits. We have an enormous amount of technology used on our behalf.